Hello, everybody. Welcome. Oh, there's so many great faces to see. Okay, I might give it just one more second, see if there's any last minute logons, and then we'll get this thing kicked off and going. Alrighty. Okay, I think this might be our crowd for tonight, and if somebody trickles in late, we'll just go ahead and admit them and welcome them as we go. My name is Logan Gerke, and I wanted to first welcome you all to the Women in Flight Financial Wellness Center, My Money's Value. It's our second annual one. Hannah Taylor hosted this last year when she was a peer financial coach. And so we're super excited to have you all here tonight. I did want to let you guys know that this session will be recorded to share with donors and future reference of our workshop. So we invite you to turn on your cameras, completely understand if you are uncomfortable to do so. And if you have any questions that you're rather privately message me, myself, or one of the speakers, perfectly acceptable to do that, just to make you all feel comfortable, because this workshop is to benefit you all. So tonight I wanted to give a big thank you to our three amazing women that we have here as our guest speakers. They are powerful, influential women in their roles in finance. And so if everyone could just please quickly just drop some love in the chat, welcome our speakers, give a little emoji or something. We want to really bring the energy this night on Tuesday. So feel free to do so. I'm super pumped to have them. But I also wanted to take a second and have you guys thank yourselves for being here. 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, and it's extremely impressive that you're taking the hour out of your time to put your personal finance goals as a focus. And yeah, just giving you guys the tools and necessary kits to becoming financially independent. It's a big topic that women just need to kind of take control of. And so I'm just loving how many participants that we have here tonight. And before we get started, I also want to give one more last shout out to Women in Flight, specifically Lexi Cross. She has been amazing in this process. And I hope you all as female student athletes just feel extremely supported and know that you have this network of women that truly want to see you succeed on and off the field. And so I believe this might be some of the first time that you all have interacted with the Financial Wellness Center. I'm curious if anybody has heard of us before. If you could maybe drop in the chat. I don't want to bore you with what the Financial Wellness Center is if you guys have already heard of us before, but I'm kind of going to just give you a brief background. So the Financial Wellness Center, it's our mission to financially empower students with the knowledge needed to make financially sound decisions during and after college. We cover what we call the Big Five, which includes earning, spending, borrowing, protecting, saving, and investing. And so we're going to touch here and there on a lot of different topics to give you guys as much exposure as you can. We're probably not going to go as much into the protecting side, but to be determined for a future workshop. And ways you could have interacted with us on campus is through our peer financial coach. So myself, we offer free one-on-one services to coaches. We have 20 amazing coaches that are excited and eager to help you all. And we also have workshops like this. I'm partnered with Women in Flight, but we have a ton of other focus area groups as well. And as well as we do specific focus groups for just like as need basis with employees on campus. And so today we are going to be covering budgeting. I'm going to send out a worksheet for you guys to practice establishing your money values. We're going to touch on crediting and get into investing on women in the stock market. And so to kick things off, I am going to pass it to Maria Chattarina. She is going to be discussing budgeting and My Money's Value. Maria is an assistant professor of finance, and if you have the opportunity to take her course, it's amazing, super engaging. So highly recommend if that comes up on your course schedule. She also is the founder of Invest in Your Future, and she has immense experience in increasing financial literacy with women in Russia. So I'd love to pass it off to Maria.
Thank you so much, Logan. It's really a great pleasure to be here and share my knowledge with you all. So how I'm here, I guess not so much in the role of the finance professor here, but rather through my engagement with the financial literacy company or like social outreach project that I started. So what I'm doing with this project is I build on my personal experience learning how to manage money and drawing on my exposure through my academic work on what are the best practices in managing money. But what I'm going to talk about today is mostly based on my personal experience and talking with my colleagues and friends on how to budget, how to actually to good habits, how to build those habits in yourself of good habits of managing money. The reason I'm saying is that I didn't learn it. Wasn't brought up in a family where this was something natural, right? So I'm coming from a very poor family. One mom raised me one paycheck family where money was always scarce, and I made it through college and grad school on scholarships. So I never had like a fallback safety net of my family to bail me out if something went wrong. So it was always kind of like trial and error, figuring out what works for me. And so what I'm going to talk about to you today is my approach on managing money, how to budget, and especially how to start budgeting if your family never kind of taught you that. If they did, fantastic. But if not, then you're not lost. And this is what I've been teaching for the last 5 years to women in Russia who find themselves in a difficult situation, sometimes after a divorce, sometimes just kind of coming to very difficult financial situations and not knowing how to actually kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel and manage those situations. So these are the main reasons. Like, I found myself budgeting because I just couldn't make my ends meet, and I had to. And so that's one of the things that I put first. So there were some long-term goals that I found myself failing to be able to achieve. And one of them was just having some cash in my bank account. Okay. So the second goal that I always bring up is self-reflection. So for me right now, I am in a very good financial situation. I have a nice stable job, but I still keep budgeting and I still keep practicing those things, because for me it's a way of self-reflecting on how am I actually using those resources? Am I doing the best with them that I can? And I ask sometimes my friends these days, do you budget? And some of them say that, well, they see their savings account grow. They kind of like feel like that's a good place to be. And it is a good place to be. I completely agree. But I say that there is something more that you can do. Even if you're very kind of diligent with your money, very prudent, you still see your savings account grow. It's still possible to do more with that if you actively self-reflect on how you manage money, how you manage your resources. And so that's what I'm going to offer to you today. When I start talking about investing in money with my clients through those women that come for financial advice to me, they typically have a lot of resistance to the idea of budgeting, and those are the most common ones that I hear. Too busy, they're doing it in their mind. So that's typically kind of, it's better to do it on paper, because trust me, there are many surprises there in the blind zones that sometimes can be very interesting to look at. It could be surprising, but it's very useful to look at. Too hard and not for me, trust me, everyone can do it. It's just one of those things that it takes effort and time to make it your own, but there is definitely a way for you to make it if you want it. If there are some long-term goals, if you have that you want to achieve, this could be a tool that could be useful for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so the way I approach this always is I try to encourage people to make a goal, and that's how it started for me. I must admit, I was 28 years old when I first wrote my first budget. Okay, so I always kind of had something in the back of my mind that I'm doing with my money, and I wasn't in debt at that moment in time, but I wasn't able to kind of get what I realized. I could never get a savings, like could never get a cushion of money that I would be comfortable setting aside. And despite the fact that I already had like a relatively stable job at that moment in time, I was still budgeting. I was still spending from paycheck to paycheck. At the end of the month, I had barely enough money left in my account. And once I talked to one of my colleagues who said, oh, I don't even know when the money hit my account. And I realized that even though they had the same salary as I do, they somehow managed it differently so that for them liquidity wasn't a problem. In other words, they managed to have enough cushion in their savings or checking account to make it through to the next month. And I got inspired by this calmness, by this idea that I don't have to worry and check my bank account every couple of hours to see if the money actually came through. And this was my dream. This was motivated me. And so I do encourage you, if this is the first time you're budgeting, try to start with the idea. It's not like I want $1,000. Try to find something that really inspires you, something that you think, like, it's not something that you yet have, but it's something that you dream about, something that inspires you. It could be a dream vacation. It could be this calmness in knowing that you have the money to cover whatever expenses, unexpected expenses can come up. And I do encourage you not to necessarily start with like 10 grand or 5 grand money, because money doesn't motivate. I find in experience working with my clients that it don't motivate you enough as much as the feeling and the enjoyment of reaching that goal, that ultimate joy of a vacation or the calmness. So try to come from like life, from the feeling that you are after once you achieve it. So try to start with a big why. Okay. Now, second step is, once again, we are not going to budget yet. And so I find that this is the most controversial step that people find. That first, I ask you to observe. Before writing down any plan, what I encourage you to do is to evaluate where you are at the moment. Okay, so what I see often people do when they try to budget and they fail, typically the reason is that they are writing the plans that are detached from where they are, from reality. It's as if I would have said, okay, in a month I want to run a marathon. I mean, I don't run. And so obviously I would fail, not because running a marathon, like I can't run a marathon, it's just unrealistic for me. The same thing with this writing a good budget starts with evaluating really honestly with yourself where you are at the moment. Okay, and so the first month, just observe, just track every single expense. The app that I use is called Personal Capital. It's cheap, it's essentially free, and there are no ads in this app. That's why I like it. Alternative is in Mint. I just don't like it for the ads that they push on me. I find them predatory because they typically advertise very expensive credit cards to me, which I don't like. I don't think it's a good thing to push on people in the financial apps. There is another one that I like, app that I've been using lately. It's called Mod. This one is a paid app, so it's kind of a trade-off if you want to invest in it or not. Okay, and one thing I want to make you aware is that once you start tracking your expenses, a lot of feelings might come up. For me, it was the shame of how much money I was spending on little things that didn't matter at the end of the day to me. And I want you to kind of encourage you to be okay with this. It might come up, but that's why we are doing it, to make sure that the way you spend your money is actually aligned with what you value at the end of the day. Next slide. So just it's normal if some feelings come up, and I see them come up in many of my clients that I work with. It's totally normal, and they will pass, trust me. And that's when we make the plan. So the plan here is essentially a sketch of how fast you want to achieve your goal. So for example, if $2,000 will be enough to cover unexpected expenses and you are comfortable reaching it in about 2 years, then it boils down to saving about $100 a month. And that's the most difficult part, is the next step. Which of your expenses are less important than this goal? Once again, I don't want you to come here with the idea that this expense is a bad expense, like $100 a month in Starbucks is bad. It's not bad. There is no such thing as overspending on cat's food. As one of my clients found out, she was spending double amount of her own groceries on just cat's food. There's no such thing as bad. The only question I would like to ask yourself is, what is more important? What is less important of those expenses than this financial goal? Okay, so please try to be mindful. If shame comes up, this is not the argument we want to involve in building your budget. The only question that I want you to keep in mind in this moment is, what of those expenses matter less than the goal? Okay. And this is the place where I encourage you to start experimenting, okay? So it might not be in the first months that you will find a plan that you can actually stick to, but I encourage you to try to find substitutes, right? So for example, if you crave Starbucks and you decide that this is less valuable than your dream vacation or a new car that you are after, then I encourage you to start experimenting with finding time with your friends differently and getting caffeine in a different place. But once again, just try to experiment how you can satisfy your needs in a different way. Cutting out and just blaming and shaming yourself, obviously not gonna work. That's not the way to make a sustainable, healthy change, okay? So try to experiment and find substitutes. And one more thing, I typically write my plans 12 months, over 12 months. But if you can't do that at the first iteration, don't worry about this. 1 month ahead of time, that's already a huge step if you've never done it before. So you will build up slowly to 12 months once you can project and plan sustainably for 1 month, okay? Next slide. And so tracking your progress is a very important thing because it helps you adjust the plan. So plan is just a roadmap. Life happens, unexpected expenses happen. It's totally normal. Don't get discouraged. Just adjust your plan. The important thing is that your plan should be as flexible and as moving as your life. But as long as you have that goal in mind, you will get there, right? As long as this goal comes from your heart, and it's not like somebody told you saving 10% a month is a good thing. I could never do it, honestly. But I am saving enough right now because I have those goals written out very explicitly of what I want, okay? So don't be afraid to adjust your plan. This is not failing. This is taking it your way, okay? And if you fear of missing out, this is one of those things that comes up a lot, right? My friends are partying. Why don't I take this $100 a month and join the party? And this is the place where this I need to save 10% will definitely fail you. But I think if you have this your goal in mind, for fear of missing out won't be a problem to overcome because you know that you're after your goal, your true goal. You're not going to be swayed away from it by those fears that are just peer pressure. At least I hope so. It helps me for sure to stay on my track. And the last slide is when we celebrate, okay? So once you achieve a first financial goal, I hope you give yourself time to celebrate and build on that. So this skill is kind of like a muscle, right? You first lift 5 pounds, then you lift 10 pounds. First you make a plan for just a couple months, and then you extend it to 6 months, a year, and then you build a 5-year plan, and then you start building plans for retirement over 30 and 40 years long, okay? So think about this as one of those financial muscles to just build up and exercise. And once again, I encourage you to be honest with yourself and not try to squeeze yourself into super tight plan on the very first month. That's not going to work. In my experience, what's going to work and create positive long-term change is that if you observe and reflect on your current habits, make incremental changes motivated by your real goals that you want to achieve. For example, dream vacation, or as it was for me, a financial cushion of a couple $1,000 or euros. I was living in Austria back then. And if you need help, please ask for help. So the way that I actually learned about budgeting is that I got the courage to ask my colleagues, because once again, it's not something that I had the luxury of learning in a family. If you do, maybe I could encourage you to be offering this help to others. And I find that this is the best way to perfect your skills, when you talk to your friends and colleagues and you reflect on them and you say, okay, why are they working? How can I make them more? How can I make them better and more accessible? And that actually helps me still when I help my friends and my colleagues, and through my project to my clients, it actually helps me back to better kind of like get a better grip on my own money. So go out there and ask for help and offer help if you are in a position. So it's sharing is caring. So thanks a lot. That's all I had to say.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was amazing. I definitely myself took away a lot of tips. And I think my biggest takeaway from that was just being gentle on yourself, and that budgets are here to adjust. And if anybody else has questions or things that resonate with themselves, like feel free to drop it in the chat. This is supposed to be super interactive, and honestly, to really, you have three amazing women that are here to answer your questions and give you as much support as they can. So really continue to take up on that opportunity. There also might be 2 Grubhub gift cards for encouraging interactions. So those lucky winners get picked at the end. So really take that moment to kind of engage on your Tuesday night. Our next speaker that we're going to invite is Stephanie Peel. And Stephanie is a professor of practice and a Porter faculty fellow. She has immense experience as a CPA at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And so she actually spoke at this event last year and did an amazing job. Loved your guys' energy. And so I was able to convince her easily, pretty much, to come back and speak again. So I will now be passing it off to Stephanie, and I will stop sharing to let you share.
Hopefully everybody can see understanding credit. So this topic is one I think is so important to all of us, because even if we are not thinking, hey, I want to whatever, go into debt or have credit card debt or whatever, credit is essential to all of our lives every single day. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that is and how it works, and what we need to know about credit. And I'm just going to start by putting this in perspective. Logan mentioned the big 5, those critical areas of holistic financial wellness at the start of the session. And so we've seen that before. Credit really focuses on this one here in the center, borrowing. And we get exposure to that as students through student loans. We want to have a general understanding of credit and what it is. Credit cards is another common exposure point that relates to credit. So during our time together, the key questions that we're really going to try to unpack is what exactly do we mean by credit? What is that? Why is it so important? Why is it something we need to know about? And as we go through this, you may be wondering, well, what about me? How do I actually know if I have good credit, or if I have bad credit, or if I really have no credit yet? How do I know about that? So we'll talk about that. And finally, based on that realization of your own credit situation, how can you take control of that credit situation going forward? So I'd like to just start briefly and hopefully get some feedback in the chat. If you think about your own experiences, like with student loans, maybe credit cards, any other borrowing you've done, or maybe you really haven't, but you might have heard about credit from members of your family or friends, or what you see in the news. What do you all think credit is? And maybe if you can just drop a little note in the chat, that would be great. No pressure. Great, Sydney, a number showing how reliable you are with borrowing money. And you've got a couple of key things in there: reliability and borrowing. And Maria, that's, yeah, credit equals debt, which can lead to fear. Alexi, that's great, buying goods or borrowing money that you'll pay back later. Yep, pay back with interest. Yeah, that's super critical. And good, I'm glad your parents said it's super important to have good credit. It is, and we'll talk about why. Yeah, excellent. You guys are all like right around the proverbial hoop on this one. So I'll just give a formal definition, then it's super formal and a little bit of funny words, but we'll talk about those. But the measure of trust that one party has in another party's ability to receive a resource now and pay for it at a designated point in the future. So the resource you might be receiving now might be money, for example, to pay your tuition. The resource you might receive now could be a house that you pay off over time or a car that you pay off over time. But in this definition, we are all another party. It's one party like a bank or an institution or something like that who is looking at us as the other party's ability to receive now and pay later. And part of that is our credit history. And I think, Sydney, that was the piece you really picked up on, that number showing how reliable you are with credit. Credit history is that measure of your ability to repay debts. And it's how you have demonstrated your responsibility in repaying them in the past. And not all gets bundled up with our definition of credit. And so you may be thinking, okay, this is great, but I'm still not convinced that credit's going to be important to my every single day of my life. But let me just introduce Adulting 101 and all the different ways that credit becomes important to us, because you might be thinking, hey, I actually plan to minimize my borrowing activities after college. I've heard it's not great to have credit card debt. I don't want a credit card or something like that. But even if that is your thought process, life after college has a lot of triggers that will require a credit check and typically good credit. So the first one is actually employment. Oftentimes when we apply for new jobs, employers will make their offer to you for employment linked to their ability to run a credit check and get a clean credit report on you. And so they do that as part of their background check. They're looking for things like, criminal convictions and things like that. But credit check is one of the items that many employees look for. And then as you move on, you get your job and you think, okay, I need some place to live and I need some wheels in order to get around town. Well, both of those adult activities also come potentially with credit checks. So whether you are renting an apartment or renting a house or actually getting a mortgage to buy a house, credit checks are really common around those kinds of activities. And similarly, if you're going to buy your first car on credit, or maybe you're leasing a vehicle, those kinds of activities also will require a credit check. Of course, now you've got a house and you've got a car. That means that you need insurance. And so renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, automobile insurance, quite often insurance companies, before they write a policy to cover your assets, they will require a credit check to get started. So that's another place that it comes into account. And Cassidy makes a great point. Things like setting up your new place, buying some furniture, or new pots and pans or what have you. Quite often you'll do that using a credit card. And so some sensible use of credit cards makes sense. Buying major appliances, maybe a washer dryer or something like that. That's a one-time purchase where you might do that with a little bit of borrowing. So consumer financing requires credit checks. And even just setting up the utilities to turn the lights on in your new place. Lots of utility companies will require a credit check before they start service. And so all of these things that are just really common things that we have to deal with every single day as adults require that credit check. So where does that take us from here? We're going to want to be seeking approval in order to either borrow money or, part of getting that clean credit check. And so if you in particular are borrowing money, there's a few common reasons why you might not get approved for credit. And so some of those common reasons are things like Maybe you requested too much credit relative to the income that you are currently earning or other aspects of your credit profile. Maybe you already are actually carrying too much debt. Maybe you have some credit card debt and you've got a car loan and some other things going on, and you are just wondering, you're just asking sort of for some additional credit. The credit card company or the bank or financial institution says, I don't know, I'm a little bit worried that if we extend you more debt, more credit, that you won't be able to repay it, or you won't be able to repay anything. So that's a factor. Short employment history, it's a really tough one for students coming out of college, because typically within the first year or 2 years of a new job, lenders will be concerned that maybe you won't keep that job into the future. They don't know how long you'll be there, and so how long will that income be reliable? And then finally, a low credit score. And so when I say low credit score, some of you may already know, but some of you may not know really what a credit score is. So let's talk a little bit about that, since that is one of the key reasons why you might not be approved for credit. So credit scores. How do you know if you actually have good credit? Does anybody, again, just drop into the chat, does anybody know what a good credit score looks like? Or even what a credit score is? Guesses on that? Above 750? Sydney, you are right on the money with that. That's excellent. 670 is a little bit lower. Paying on time. 850 is an astounding credit score. So that's terrific. Yep, Gianna, it is in part a measure of how good you are about paying money back. And that's one of the big factors in your credit score. So a credit score is it's typically this 3-digit number, and it's calculated based on a variety of information that gets accrued into a credit report for every one of us. We can go and pull our credit report. We'll talk about that in a minute. One of the best known credit scores is the Fico score. And so quite often we've heard that term Fico score, but there's others. Fico score is just a type of credit score that was developed by a company called the Fair Isaac Corporation. But most of them use 3-digit numbers. Here's FICO's on the left and Vantage is on the right, two common measures. And so with FICO, 850 is pretty much the max score that you can receive, and pretty hard to get because there's a lot of different factors that go into this funky magic that is how these companies calculate this credit score. But really anything on the FICO score from 740 and above is considered very good or exceptional. There's no score below 300, but when you are really below about 670, you're in the fair, or they use the term very poor. I think that's a bad term. I think a bad credit score is a better term to use, but in that 300 to 670 bucket. And so where do you find your credit score? Lots of credit card companies now have an ability to look at your credit score. So Credit Karma is a great place. I have a Discover card, and my Discover card is forever sending me little notes to say, hey, your FICO score has been updated, click here to check it. And I like to check on that routinely. There's other financial service companies that provide your credit score as part of a fee for service or with advertising. I know Professor Chattarina earlier mentioned Mint, and Mint is a tool I sometimes use for budgeting. I'm with her. I don't love the advertising, but it does give me an update on my credit score every other month, which is helpful. But there's other services that do as well. If you can find places where you already maybe have a bank account, a savings account, a credit card where you can check on it, that is terrific. And some of the things that impact your credit score are your payment history, how long you have had credit, which is hard when you're first getting started because you typically haven't had credit all that long, how much of your credit balance you are using, how many times you've applied for credit recently. But the biggest factor here is your payment history. How often are you making your payments on time versus skipping those payments or something else? And so if you can just make your payments on time, that has a huge impact on your credit score. And why is that so important? Well, your credit score impacts the interest rate charged to you on credit cards and debt. So that's super critical. So I like to think about this as a timeline so that you can see how quickly we accrue debt. And if we start off with sort of a basic scenario, which is laptop dies, gotta buy a suit for upcoming interviews, eating out more than usual, I put all these charges on a credit card. Maybe I've got about $2,000 in credit card debt, and it's a credit card where my interest rate is 18%. At the end of that first month, credit card company is going to send a bill and they say, at a minimum, you owe us $60. And so if you just make that $60 payment, you'll be down to a balance of $1,940. Maybe you go into the next month, an additional $200 is what you charge. Well, now you're up to $2,140 on the next balance, plus the credit card company says, I'm going to charge you interest for the privilege of having borrowed this money. And based on that 18% rate for the year, it's $32 worth of interest on that balance for the month. They add that to your total balance, and then they figure out your new minimum payment. If you keep going in this cycle, you start losing ground quickly, and this balance grows and grows and grows. And if you can't make more than the minimum payment and you keep making purchases, soon enough you'll hit the credit limit on that credit card. And in fact, even if you stop making any new charges and just start making the minimum payments, it will take you 111 months to pay off that balance. It's like 9 years, basically. And by the time you're done, you would have put $2,400 worth of charges on that credit card, and you'd pay almost that amount in interest to get it paid off. And so compound interest is one of the things that works against you when you're trying to get out of a debt situation. And so, I think I got some good questions in here. I'm gonna sort of scoot past this. I think the key thing I want to point out here is, let me just pause. Actually, let me just answer these questions. So is it true that requesting your credit score could negatively affect your score? Cassidy, it's a great question. And if you are looking at your credit score, it does not negatively affect your score. You have a right to understand what your credit report, and those are considered what are called soft pulls of credit or soft credit inquiries. Those do not affect your credit score. If you go to buy a car and you go to the first car dealership and look at financing and they pull your credit, then you say, oh, I'm not gonna get that loan. And now I go to another car dealership and they pull credit. Each one of those pulls will negatively affect your credit. But if you're looking for your credit score, that's not a problem. And then Lexi, a question about building a good credit score. Is it true that if you get a credit card early and don't really use it and make payments on time, it will help build a good score for when you do start using it? That is absolutely true. You don't want to close those credit cards that you are having like good success in building a good credit history with. I have one credit card that I've had open for 30 years, if you can believe that. And that one definitely helps to keep my credit score higher, because over the course of time, as long as I've had that credit card, I've done a really good job of paying for my balances on time. So keeping that long credit history is helpful. And does paying the full balance instead of the minimum balance increase your credit score? And Janet, I have to see that I think that, paying the full balance is good when you can do that because you're not accruing that interest and so forth. And paying the full balance means that then you're bringing that credit balance back down each month and leaving a bigger cushion for available credit. But just making the minimum payment, so long as you make it on time, that's one of the most essential elements in your credit score. So whether you're paying the full balance or the minimum balance, those are super important factors. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm actually, let me just scoot past this. If you have other questions, I'm actually happy to answer them, and that's better than me telling you a whole bunch of things on the slide. I think it's really important that you do check your credit score frequently and understand where you are. Download your credit report, look for information that's incorrect, and let the credit reporting agencies know if that's the case. Make sure you weigh your options before opening a new credit card or taking on new debt, especially credit cards. A lot of times they'll be like, hey, free t-shirt, lots of miles. If that's not worth it to you, opening up that additional credit card is not necessarily a great thing and can be a path to getting yourself into some trouble. If you don't have credit right now and you're trying to build it, try to get on a secured card or tag along with others and make sure you're paying those bills on time. And if you're trying to improve your credit, again, paying the bills on time, super critical. Get those outstanding balances paid down so you have greater room between your credit limit and how much you already have borrowed. But don't close those cards once you get them paid off. They help to contribute to your credit history. And so, Lexi, you asked, what are some of the drawbacks to applying for a credit card? One is that if you are, every time you apply for a credit card, they are doing a hard pull of your credit. And so that is a factor that would contribute to your credit score going down just a bit. And so if you went out and all of a sudden in short order, you applied for 5 new credit cards, every time they went and ran a credit check, your score would go down a little, your score would go down a little. Also, I just have had the personal experience with friends and colleagues who have gotten themselves in a little bit of trouble, that the more credit cards you have, the easier it is to sort of spend. And if you're not really minding the budget, as Professor Chaturina talks about, it can be easy to kind of get behind the ball with that. Great question on if there is a credit card for a college student. I don't have really a specific recommendation for that. One of the things that I think is really important is if you can find a credit card that's not charging you fees, that is super helpful. So, sometimes you make the choice, at least I have, that I'll get an affinity card that gives me miles. But that can be really expensive. And I've seen affinity cards before where the annual fee will be $350, $450, and what they offer in exchange isn't worth it to me. But like, I have had a Discover card forever. I've never charged a fee. It gives me good credit. It's a reasonable interest rate if I needed to pay interest on it. I think you just have to kind of balance the how much, what might I get in terms of my credit limit? How much am I paying in fees? What's the interest? And do unpaid student loans bring down your credit score while you're in school? And Gilbert, I'm going to give a shout out to you to confirm. My understanding is no, while you're in school, those loans don't affect your credit score. But am I right in that conclusion?
That's right. Not until they go into repayment.
Perfect. Okay, good. Awesome. These are great questions. I've left a few links here, and I know Logan has these slides, so you can get your credit report through annocreditreport.com. And that's really the kind of the official source for getting credit reports. Watch. There's lots of them that will sort of advertise online, and they're not the best places. My Fico can be a resource for Fico scores. There's some other resources here. The other one I want to give a shout out to is personally my favorite podcast. If you go to hermoney.com, the Her Money podcast with Jean Chatsky. Jean has been a reporter in the personal finance space forever, and she does an amazing job covering a myriad of topics related to personal finance, really through the eyes of women. And so I think it's an outstanding resource. If you're looking for a new podcast to add to your list this spring or summer, highly recommend them. So I think Logan, I'm really sorry I went really over time. Hopefully answering questions was a good thing. I'm going to stop the share and pass it back to you. And if people have more questions, pop them in the chat. I'm happy to.
Good. Answering questions is what we're all about and what we want this workshop to be. So really appreciate everyone dropping all their questions in. I mean, credit's super interesting and something that's really important in the world of adulting and something that we don't really kind of shed light to during our college experience. And so thank you, Stephanie. If anyone, for Maria, Stephanie, Hannah, I'm about to pass it off to her, but anyone has questions, keep going. Well, we just want to give you guys all the information we can. And so I am going to share my screen again. And so for our last, and certainly not least, I'm going to invite Hannah Montana, Hannah Taylor to the stage to talk about investing in women in the stock market. Many people might have seen Hannah before. She's definitely a familiar face, and she is an alumni of the University of Oregon soccer team. And she was also a peer financial coach last year and is staying on as our financial wellness coordinator. And she's also most recently a project cost accountant at Consulting Engineers. And so without further ado, I'll give you Hannah Taylor.
Thanks, Logan. It's so exciting to be on this. As Logan mentioned, last year I was in the works of planning it. And so this year to get the opportunity to speak is really exciting. Also, all the information, just to reiterate, that Professor Chatarina and Stephanie have shared. I mean, being really on the brink of just entering a job, just moving on from college, athletics, it's all so important. And it's like all the budgeting, credit, I've run into multiple times where I've needed credit. It's so important. And so the earlier that we understand this and can learn this and apply what everybody's talking about, the better we're going to be moving forward. So just want to reiterate the importance of it and being in the transition from athletics to quote unquote real life. I'm really finding that all of this is so important and useful and not necessarily talked about. So I'm thankful for events like this where we can start the conversation earlier than when we actually encounter it. So I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about investing, more so just to get your eyes opened and hopefully intrigued into the power that investing can be and the opportunity that we have at our age to start now rather than wait until later. So briefly, what is investing? When we invest, we're making an investment, giving our money to a company or an enterprise, or even maybe a person, hoping that it will be successful. And in the end, obviously, we want to get more back than what we started with. So Logan, you can hop on to the next. And so I just wanted to point out a few reasons why investing is important. One is that no matter where we're at, we're all going to be facing inflation. And so investing provides us an opportunity to get a greater return potentially than what the inflation rate is. And with that, with inflation, saving alone might not be enough, whether that's in regards to inflation, what our hopes for our future retirement might look like. Investing might be a piece to the puzzle in getting us where we want to go. And then the bigger our return, the less we have to set aside. And that's thanks to compound interest and the return that we can get. So contrary to what Stephanie shared, where compound interest can work against you, with investing and time in the market, compound interest can work for us. And then just allowing our money to work for us, it can be a source of passive income rather than active income of our day-to-day jobs. Investing can provide that income where no matter what we're doing, whether we're tending to it or not, money can be growing. Investing also just provides an opportunity to diversify our savings portfolio. So like Professor Chatarina talked about, whatever our long-term goals are, the ways to get there, the more we can diversify how we're saving can potentially get us there quicker or reach multiple of those goals. And then lastly, I know I reiterated it, but let time work for you. We all have such a big opportunity with the age that we're at and the historical returns of the market, which I'll talk about right now. But time can be our best friend. Logan, you can hop on to the next slide. All right, so this is just following up on that, a little graphic of why investing can be so important. Also, just note that these returns aren't guaranteed and they're not exactly every 30 years from now what it's necessarily going to be, but this is just a graphic of 30-year returns ending in 2017. So with stocks, there was an average return of about 10%. bonds 6%, cash 3%, and inflation of 2.7. So say you invested in stocks, your return after accounting for inflation would be just over 7%. And so again, that just shows the importance and the opportunity that investing can provide. But one thing to point out is that in 2002, stocks lost over 20%, and in 2008, stocks lost over 40%. So if I was to have invested all my money in 2007 and then was like, I want it all back times 100 in 2009, probably wouldn't have happened. And so just goes to show the importance of sticking in the market and the impact that time can have, rather than just trying to, it's not going to be instant gratification like a lot of things are. It's definitely going to be something where the reward is going to come over time. So Logan, you can slide on to the next slide. This is kind of similar along the same lines of the last one, but this is actually just a financial numbers example, kind of like Stephanie did with the credit. So if you were, this is over a 40-year time period, again, hypothetical, based on the returns that we just saw in the previous slide. So if I was to invest $250 per month starting today, hypothetically, 40 years from now, I'd have $1.67 million. If I was to invest in bonds, about $500,000, and then in cash, it would be $250,000. So that difference between the cash and the stocks obviously shows the power of compound interest, what your return would be, and time in the market. So just a little bit of an example of what can happen over time with consistent investments, with compound interest, and obviously just with consistency. So Logan, if you want to hop on to the next one. And then I know last year we had an event and there was a graphic that was showing just the power, or it was considered the cost of waiting. So basically we can look at it as the power of starting now or the cost of waiting. And so just another numerical example, if I start saving at the age of 25 and I save for 15 years and I save $150,000, and the return after inflation is 6% per year, by age 65, I would have about $1 million. Now, say if Logan over here is like, I'm good, I'm not going to start investing yet. But she starts and she's like, I'm all in at 35. And for 30 years, Logan's putting away money, a total of 300,000. So double of what I started putting away. At 65, both same timeline, she's gonna have about 838,000. And so this is, to me, a very eye-opening graphic and a little bit mind-blowing of just the cost of waiting 10 years. Instead of me investing 150,000 for 15 years, Logan invested double the money and double the time and still didn't have, still had less at the end of the day. And so I just think that this is an encouragement. I know when I saw this, was just like, wow, like the power of starting today versus waiting until I was 30. And also just the encouragement that I got that starting today doesn't mean that I need to start with 10 grand, doesn't mean that I even need to start with $500. Like Professor Chatarina said, with budgeting, you're not going to save 10 grand in your first month, but to have maybe those short-term consistent savings that build up and create long-term habits will then allow you to get there over time. And I know that's a lot of the advice that I've gotten with investing is maybe start with $20 a month or $50 a month. And following Professor Chatarina's suggestions with budgeting is also very tied with investing. The more you can budget and kind of figure out, well, how can I save $20 to then invest? You can potentially reach the goals that you want. So Logan, if you would want to slide on over. And then last year in one of our events with Women in Flight, I shared a little bit about women in the stock market from a study that Gilbert had shared with me. And I found it really interesting, and a lot of people gave some really good feedback about it and were wanting to hear a little bit more. And so this year, combined with the GFlex study, was the 2021 Fidelity Investment Study. And hopefully this is more just empowering to look at as to where we're at and where we're going with women. So in this study, they found that 2/3 of women do not feel confident in their ability to make investments decisions. However, younger women are tapping into resources to boost their financial knowledge. So shout out to all of you that are here tonight. We're a part of that group that's tapping in to resources that are at our fingertips. And then in the GFLEX study that Gilbert shared with me, 1/3 of financial literacy gender gap can be explained by a lack of confidence. And so this one was more talking about when women have the opportunity to say yes, no, or I don't know. Women say, I don't know. But then when we have the opportunity to say yes or no, we typically go with the right answer. And it was all correlated to investing. And I found it super interesting. And if anyone is interested in that study, I'd be happy to pass it along. However, at the end of the day, and Cheyenne, who was a financial advisor and talked last year, was explaining to us that at the end of the day, when women do get involved in the stock market, involved with investing, we outperform our male counterparts. And a lot of this is tied back to women having the ability to do a buy and hold strategy. So like we had talked about, investing over long term and long periods of time, compared to kind of emotional investing of like selling or buying based on the emotions and the ups and downs of the market. And then lastly, I found this really exciting for where we're going, is that in this Fidelity investment study, 50% of women said they've become more interested in investing since the start of the pandemic. I think a lot of this is due to technology, the way the market has moved up and down, and just the way the word is spreading. And so I would just encourage all of us, I'm sure a lot of us, probably 50% of us have become more interested. And there's just so many resources out there that we can use just at the start of a Google search, but obviously ones that are more backed by actual financial research through institutions, through investment platforms and brokerages. And so hopefully this just empowers you with the opportunity that we have in the direction that we're headed as women in the stock market. Logan, you can hop on over. And then this is just a little bit of encouragement of how to get started. There's so many more bullet points that could probably go on this, but the first one and most important one is circling back to what Professor Chattarina talked about. Everything with our financial journeys pretty much starts with a budget. So whether or not we want to, or whether or not it might not be the most exciting thing at the start, but the more you get into it, the more you realize that that budget creates opportunities. Shout out to Stephanie sharing that line with me, and something that I found really powerful. And so your budget is going to allow you to determine how much you can invest, but also allow you to maybe rework certain aspects of it to maybe find more money that you could invest. And then you're going to want to find a brokerage platform, but first do your research on the different types of accounts and different brokerage platforms that are out there. There's self-directed accounts where you're picking individual stocks or ETFs or mutual funds. There's guided accounts where an advisor is picking them for you. There's traditional investment accounts. There's retirement accounts. So there's a wide variety of different types of accounts. So definitely do your research and figure out which one suits you best and the goals that you have. And maybe it's one and maybe it's a combo of a whole bunch of them. And then here are just a few big brokerage platforms, to name a few: Merrill Lynch, TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, Charles Schwab. But again, this is just a few of so many that are out there. I know even my small local bank has a branch of investing, and a lot of people maybe go to their bank to get referrals or to start. And then you're going to want to open the account with the platform of your choice. Determine your risk tolerance, which basically is how risky you want to be. If you're wanting to go maybe more conservative, you might get a smaller return over time, or maybe a riskier, higher is obviously the goal, but it can vary depending on the market and the way things go. And then do your research on what you want to invest in. I think that that's obviously the most important thing, is to just be knowledgeable about where you're putting your money and aligning it with also what you value. And then lastly is just kickstarting with an initial investment. And like I'd said before, it doesn't need to be hundreds or thousands of dollars. It can be something small, and then just consistently adding over time and utilizing compound interest can be so important. And one thing that I know has helped me kind of get kickstarted with investing when maybe I don't have a ton of money to put there at the start has just been setting up automated investments on a schedule that works for me. So maybe after my paycheck, there's automatically just money taken and invested, which has helped minimize the maybe I won't invest this month, or I'd rather go buy this or that. It's just built in, and I honestly just look at it as a fixed cost in my budget every month, and that's helped me just keep accountable with what I'm investing. And then lastly, Logan, you can head to the next slide because the bullet point is tied in. But Lorna Capista, the head of Women Investors and Customer Engagement at Fidelity, shared a quote: "One of the biggest regrets for boomer women is not investing more when they were younger." And I know that a lot of people that I've talked to, heard advice from, have said something along the similar lines. And so I think events like this are a huge opportunity to just get exposed to what is out there and what we can do with our money. And so hopefully we are part of the generation that can kind of flip the narrative and have been really proactive in taking, I guess, grabbing these opportunities while we're here, rather than looking back and wishing we had hopped on a little bit earlier. And so thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you feel encouraged of just the opportunity that we have at our age. Maybe Professor Chatterina has something to add. I'm not sure. I know tomorrow you're doing a workshop, so hopefully everybody can hop on over to that tomorrow afternoon. But thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I think you did an amazing job, and I completely agree with everything you said. It's, yeah, making time, utilizing the time is one of the key things. I can share one thing. It's like when I was working in Vienna for 6 years, one of my best decisions was to set up an automatic withdrawal to a saving account. It wasn't even investment back then. Saving account of $50. 50 euros, sorry. And at the end of the 6 years, I was astonished how much money accumulated in my savings account, right? And so it might seem like a trivial thing. Come on, $50. I mean, my salary was back then around 80,000 euros a year, but you have to know that in there the tax rates are about 50%. So it wasn't that much of a paycheck that I was taking home, but still it was good. It's like 50 euros, and still it was a lot. So I can only strongly encourage you, every single dollar that you put aside a month counts. So yeah, just go and research. There are online brokers that are very reliable, still have the same insurance as any other broker have. You will not be exposing yourself to any risk, unnecessary risk, even with brokers like Robinhood and other things. And they make it really easy to invest even $10 if you have. No commissions, no nothing. So really, there are a lot of ways to enter the market. Just my advice, just do it. Yeah, as early as you can. Thanks so much, Hannah. Thanks.
And one thing to add to that really quickly, thank you, Professor Chatterina, is just also understanding the reality, especially of being a collegiate student athlete, where maybe I know I didn't have a job until my senior year when I joined the Financial Wellness Center. Money can be tight. There might not be any income or any money to spend. And so I know one thing that worked for me, and I would encourage others, is the time that maybe we don't have that extra income to invest. One, the budget, if we can maybe make that, but two, if it really isn't a reality, just taking the time, 10 minutes here or there to just educate yourself or learn. And then when you do have the money, you already know a little bit more and maybe are more informed to invest it. So just one thing, I know it can be hard in college, and I am right there with you, with all of you. So yeah, thank you.
I think Malu Ri has a very good question. How to navigate in terms of how much money to put into savings versus how much to invest in the market. And the way I think about my market investments is definitely not an investment for 1 year or even for 3 years. This is an investment that I build, I invest in the market, and I have a strategy of at least 5 years. So if you anticipate that you will need money sooner, that's the fraction that should go typically towards your savings account. So I think it's wonderful that you're already thinking about how to allocate the money between those two. I typically have some savings in my savings account and towards put money towards investment. So once you start having goals that spread over multiple years, then you can allocate more towards investments. So once again, I think it's great to start with a little bit to both, and then you will see that once you have like a stable job and also so on and so forth, you will be more heavily leaning towards investments. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might early on, these decisions can change over time, right? As Professor Chatterina says, early on, it might be important to give a little bit more to savings so you can build up some emergency savings. So if you have a surprise that comes up, you don't have to use credit cards to cover the surprise, right? Dog swallows dog toy, has to go to vet. That's expensive. If you have a little emergency savings, that's not a crisis. So if early on you put a little bit more into savings, but you're still doing some investing, that's good. Once you get that emergency savings cushion, then you can flip it and go the other way, put more into investing, and you don't have to add as much to your savings. You're just kind of replenishing or maybe saving for some shorter term goals. So be flexible with yourself. I think Professor Chatterina said that earlier with the budget. Be flexible as your circumstances change.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Oh, do you have another question? Oh, Gilbert was just adding something in the chat. But thank you so much, Hannah and Maria and Stephanie, for adding in on investing. It's super impressive on how much like a 10-year span can just make a difference in the long run, and just every little bit counts. So I'm sorry that we went a little bit over, everybody. I hope that you still got a lot of value out of this. And I just wanted to touch on that Maria would be giving another event tomorrow at 4 p.m. She's going to talk about women and investing. So if what Hannah and Maria and Stephanie all touched on piqued your interest, please just continue to support and go out tomorrow and keep learning. Personal finances and achieving your goals is always something that you can continue to work on and learn a lot out of each of our workshops. And you can also find us by scheduling a one-on-one appointment with any of our peer financial coaches through the Financial Wellness Center. It's super easy. We're really flexible. We have a bunch of great coaches that would love to sit down with you and help you build that flexible budget that Maria touched on. And so that can be found on our website. And also, I'm paired with Women in Flight. So if you have any workshop topic ideas, I would love to hear from you guys on what you would love to see in spring term. So feel free to reach out to me. Let me know any of your ideas, whether if it's more on budgeting, credit, investing, taxes. I know some people have asked me about. So I want to be the best resource I can for you all. So please let me know about anything that you would love to see in the future. But round of applause to our guest speakers, and maybe just drop some more love in the chat for them because they did amazing and I really enjoyed having them here tonight.
Thank you so much, Logan. It was wonderful. Thanks a lot for organizing. Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for all the great questions too. This was terrific.
Yeah, and if any more questions pop up, feel free to shoot us an email. I'm happy to get you all in touch to answer them and forward them on. And I also almost forgot to announce our 2 Grubhub gift card winners are Lexi Likens and Gianna Cameron. So I will be reaching out with you guys to give you your $25. So thank you so much again for supporting everybody.